So, with us being halfway through the regular season and the trading deadline right around the corner, I do believe it is appropriate to go back and look at some of the transactions that happened over the summer and regrade them. The reason why I say this is for two reasons. A, some of the trades that we see during this trading deadline will be in direct response into what may have happened during the offseason, regardless if that is a positive or negative response from certain teams. And B, with hindsight being 2020, I do believe it will be a bit interesting and humorous to go back and look at some of the transactions that occurred during the offseason and readjust our thought process on some of those trade signings and draft picks. And no, I don't just mean that negatively, I mean that through a positive lens as well. And to prove this, let's start off with the Chicago Bulls. During the summer, the Chicago Bulls had one of the most eventful off seasons in the NBA, and rightfully so, because Chicago was heading in a direction where they possibly could have lost Zach LaVine if they didn't start turning things around. This change in direction began with Vucevic during the trading deadline last year, and it continued all throughout the summer with acquisitions such as DeMar DeRozan, Lonzo Ball, and Alex Caruso. And while adding all of those pieces to their team, the Bulls didn't really lose that much in the process, which is the biggest reason why it was so impressive from what I saw in Chicago and why I gave them an A- before the season began. My only real concerns was what they were going to be able to produce defensively, especially in the inside, and what else they were going to be able to get for players such as Lauri Markkanen and Kobe White if they decided to move in that direction. Well, here we are now, and Chicago still not only has an A, but I'm actually going to bump it up to an A+. Now, please don't get me wrong, the interior defense is still a problem, and quite frankly, I don't really think they're going to change that unless they finally move off of Kobe White. But in every other aspect, this team has been not only great, but has been exceeding expectations. Offensively, Chicago ranks 4th in the NBA as I record this video, and a huge reason for that is because DeMar DeRozan is having one of his best seasons of his career, which speaks volumes to a player of his caliber who at one point in his career was a 27-point-per-game scorer. DeRozan, even with his limitations, can add an offensive fold to this team that is desperately needed, especially since Zach LaVine in previous years needed some help shouldering the load on that end of the floor. Lonzo and Caruso have been able to add on both sides of the floor, and on the defensive end in particular, they've been playing so great that many people, including myself, could argue that they should make all defensive teams this year. And I want to take the time out to apologize to Caruso because part of the reason why I gave this team an A- during the offseason is because I felt like he was receiving a tad bit too much money. However, looking at his production, looking at what he provides to his team, him receiving $8 to $9 million is a solid contract, quite frankly. But the biggest reason why this is an A+ for me is because they're actually winning games. As I record this video, Chicago finds themselves with the #1 seed in the Eastern Conference, which is not only amazing and exceeding expectations, but also very important because this is an organization that needed to start turning things around quickly as Zach LaVine is entering the last year of his contract and easily could have just left in free agency, or Chicago would have been forced to trade him during this trading deadline if they were still a losing franchise. And so, yes, because of that, I give Chicago an A+. Up next, we have the Los Angeles Lakers. After a disappointing first-round exit, the Lakers went into the offseason looking to bounce back in a major way. And instead of fortifying their bench or possibly changing some of their philosophies defensively, the Lakers decided to opt into a more star-studded option. By trading some key role players in Kyle Kuzma, Montrezl Harrell, and KCP, the Lakers in return received Russell Westbrook, which put high expectations on this team in the upcoming season, as many people were willing to label them now a super team. For the remainder of the offseason, the Lakers surrounded their stars in AD, Russ, and LeBron with three-point shooting and potentially some defensive pieces. And when it was all said and done, despite my various concerns with adding Westbrook on this team, I still gave them an A at the end of the offseason. However, here we are now in the middle of the season, and I have to change that grade to a D-. For starters, a lot of the role players that were added to this team are either inconsistent or just too one-dimensional to make a major impact when it's needed. Trevor Ariza, who dealt with an injury before the season began, just isn't the same defensive player that he once was before. Carmelo Anthony may fool you with his box score shooting percentages. However, after the first 11 games of the season, he has been mediocre at best. and additions such as Rajon Rondo, Kent Bazemore, and DeAndre Jordan have been virtually unplayable. The only reason why I don't make this grade from a D- to an F is because both Malik Monk and Austin Reeves have been a breath of fresh air periodically through the season. And then we get to the elephant in the room, and that is Russell Westbrook. Again, before the season began, I voiced my concerns with this team adding Westbrook, mainly because of the fit. And quite frankly, because of that alone, my expectations for Russ entering the season weren't that high. And yet, he still has not even been able to meet those lower expectations. With a lesser role on the team, Westbrook is still turning the ball over 4 times a game. As a defender, I never expected him to play at an elite level, but I definitely thought there would have been some improvements with a lesser offensive load, but that hasn't really panned out either. And in terms of 3-point shooting and floor spacing, I never expected that out of Russ, but I definitely thought he was going to be able to finish at the rim much more consistently than he has so far this season. To make matters worse, Kuzma, now in Washington, is actually playing really good and is having one of his best seasons of his career, and I do believe the Lakers desperately miss a 3-and-D role player such as KCP. Furthermore, with the Lakers heading in the direction of Russell Westbrook, that means that they missed out on the opportunity to add DeMar DeRozan to this team or possibly trade for Buddy Hield, and even had limited space salary cap wise to bring back Alex Caruso, as Westbrook is taking up $44 million of the Lakers' payroll. So in conclusion, regardless if you were someone who was labeling the Lakers a super team or not, this team is severely missing the mark, and I don't think anyone predicted the Lakers to be battling with a 500 record midway through the season, and yet here we are, and that's why I have to give them a D-. Up next, we have the Miami Heat, another franchise who fell miserably in the playoffs last year with a first-round exit, but instead of heading in the path of the Los Angeles Lakers, for the most part, Miami just stayed pat and didn't overreact to what could have been an anomaly postseason run. Miami dished out money to Duncan Robinson, giving him a 5-year, $90 million contract. They also paid Jimmy Butler a 4-year, $184 million contract. And even though they lost some role players such as Iguodala, Trevor Ariza, Bjelica, and Kendrick Nunn, they also brought in some quality pieces as well in PJ Tucker and Markieff Morris for very respectable deals. The only noteworthy change that Miami made was trading away Goran Dragic to Toronto and in return receiving Kyle Lowry in a sign and trade. Now, even though many people, including myself, believe that Miami should have been moving in a more of a clear-cut direction, I was still respectful enough to give this team a B-, despite a lot of concerns of what this team may look like in the near future. And with us now being midway through the season, I'm still going to stay firm on my B- grade. First of all, Miami actually made the right decision by not overreacting and trading Tyler Hero, despite many people, including myself, believing that that's the direction that they should have moved in. However, on the other hand, the Duncan Robinson contract may seem like a tad bit too much, especially for someone who just really provides 3-point shooting, and so far this season he's been doing that inconsistently. Both PJ Tucker and Markieff Morris have been great additions to this team, especially with the amount of money that they received. However, on the other hand, due to injuries and the Rona running rampant out there in Miami, I do believe that this organization has missed some of their key pieces that they've acquired over the years as role players. However, the biggest reason why I'm still standing firm on a B- is because of the Kyle Lowry and Jimmy Butler contracts. Granted, I think Miami has done a great job by still being able to acquire and retain star talented players. However, at the price point that we see from both Kyle Lowry and Jimmy Butler, I believe that it's still a bit excessive. But again, respectfully, I give them a B-. This is still a team that is finishing top 4 in the Eastern Conference despite injuries and dealing with health and safety protocol issues all season long, and regardless of who's in and out of the lineup, they still have enough talent to still push for a home court advantage entering the playoffs, so I applaud Miami for that. Up next, we have the New York Knicks, and boy, do I feel bamboozled. Last year, the New York Knicks actually had a pretty impressive season. It was one of the best years in the last 10 seasons for the franchise, as New York broke a 7-year playoff drought, and they did so with the help of their third-ranked defense and Julius Randle having a breakout season. Now, the success was very short-lived with the first-round exit. However, their problems were very identifiable, especially offensively, because they ranked 23rd in the NBA. So, to address those concerns, the New York Knicks went after Kemba Walker, brought in Evan Fournier, gave Julius Randle the 4-year, $117 million contract that many people, including myself, believe that he rightfully deserved, and brought back Derrick Rose. In the process, the Knicks didn't really lose anything of substance, so when I gave the Knicks a B+, I thought that that was pretty respectable, and quite frankly, the only concern that I had for the Knicks was how much money they were paying Evan Fournier and how well was Kemba Walker going to be able to fit in this team offensively without giving up too much on the other side of the floor. But now here we are in the middle of the season. I have to change my rating from a B+ to a D because, boy, has a lot of things changed. For starters, this team has regressed a lot defensively, and some of which just has to do with effort, as well as some of the new personnel that has been added to this team, which again was some of my concerns with adding Kemba Walker and Evan Fournier. Another problem with this team is that their star player, Julius Randle, who again just received a 4-year, $117 million contract, just isn't living up to expectations. Now, granted, that contract doesn't kick in until next season. However, if Julius Randle isn't able to bounce back to an all-NBA caliber player, or heck, even to an all-star caliber player, I do believe it is fair to say that Randle moving forward will be overpaid. But more importantly, last year the Knicks' problem was offense, and this year their problem is still offense. The addition of Evan Fournier and Kemba Walker, as well as bringing back some pieces such as Derrick Rose, quite frankly, just isn't moving the needle enough. And because of that, not only do I believe that the Knicks are going to regret some of those transactions, again, like I highlighted before Julius Randle, but also this does leave them a little bit limited on what they can do moving forward in terms of trying to address some of their concerns. Now, just briefly, two of the teams that I talked about during the summer that I want to knock out as quick as possible, one of which are the Phoenix Suns, a team that I gave an A- during the summer, mainly because they addressed a lot of concerns while still retaining Chris Paul. And the only reason why I didn't give them an A+ is because I was kind of concerned with the amount of money that they were giving to CP3. And now here we are in the middle of the season, and I'm going to keep that A- grading. I believe JaVale McGee was a great addition to this team because they desperately needed to give DeAndre Ayton some help in the rotation. And even though Cameron Payne might not be meeting the expectations of some very optimistic Suns fans, I still believe his team-friendly contract is very beneficial. But the only reason why I will not improve this grade to an A or A+ is again because of Chris Paul. Even though he's playing good to great so far this season, he's not playing $30 million good. So again, I just have to hold off on that because I still believe that will be a problem down the line. And then we have the New Orleans Pelicans, who during the summer I gave them a C, and right now I'm actually going to go down a grade and give them a C-. Just a quick reminder, the Pelicans over the summer revamped their roster to give them more of a heliocentric style offense surrounding Zion, which in theory sounds great, but here we are now in the middle of the season and we can already see the problems of that, mainly because Zion still has not played a single game, and trying to make a heliocentric offense surrounding a player who has dealt with injury problems since the beginning of his career is very problematic. I will give them credit where credit is due. Valanciunas might actually be a quality big man to place around Zion when he is back, as he is having the best three-point shooting season of his career, but it is just an undeniable hard pill to swallow when you look at the assets that the Pelicans lost throughout the offseason. The Pelicans just allowed Lonzo to walk in free agency because they felt like he was getting paid too much, or they didn't want to spend that much money on an off-ball guard, so they replaced him with Devontae Graham. However, when you look at Lonzo and his production and then compare that to other players at similar price points, quite frankly, I don't believe that Lonzo is overpaid one bit. And then you had the Steven Adams, Eric Bledsoe trade, where the contracts were just so unmanageable that the Pelicans actually had to give up draft compensations to the Memphis Grizzlies. One of those draft picks was not only a top 10 pick in last year's draft class, but also another draft pick was this year's Lakers pick that the Pelicans received during the Anthony Davis trade, which essentially means the Pelicans lost two assets that they received during the AD trade in one summer, mainly because of budgeting concerns. But hey, those are just my thoughts. Please let me know what you think about the video in the comment section below. Also, check out my second channel, Foot on the Line, where I give you more trivial, topical conversations about basketball on a much more frequent basis. And as always, if you enjoy the content, make sure you hit the subscribe button and notification bell. And until next time, I'll see you all later. Peace.